Hello. So for today, we're going to go over low poly art. Low poly is a polygon mesh in 3D computer graphics that has a relatively small number of polygons. Low poly meshes occur in real-time application as contrast with high poly meshes in animation movies and different special effects. So on this assignment, I do have some past student projects that you can take a look at. Let me open this up in a new window. And what you're going to notice is that the image is abstracted into smaller triangles. That's kind of part of what goes along with the low poly look. Let me go over to the next one here. Here's an image of the before and the after. There we go. So we have the puppy off to the left, and then it's broken down, abstracted into lots of different small triangles that then when you put them together makes it look like the original image. I think I've got one more out here for you to take a peek at. The next one I'll just do is the brush viper. There we go. So you'll see that the individual scales of the viper are all low poly, all done in the small triangles. And especially with this animal, it does really work well with the triangles. And with our design that we'll be working on, it is all about the triangles. The other thing I like to point out is where you're going to add a little bit more detail is really in around the eye sockets and the major facial features of the bird that you'll be working on. And then as you get a little further back, you'll notice that the triangles get a little bit wider and switch up the colors to still show some of the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. So let me head on back out here to Google Classroom. I do provide you with several different options on the step-by-step tutorials. One does have a video that goes along with it. And I'm going to close out of these here, but I'm going to take you through the step-by-step option here that I've got out there. So this is the low poly tutorial. There's a couple examples up at the top there. So low poly style art has been pretty popular on the web recently, and for good reason. It can look pretty awesome when it's all done. Originally, the technique was designed for 3D modeling, but we're going to learn how to imitate this style using a photo. And we'll be working strictly into Photoshop here. For my demo, I'm going to be using a Corgi, so we don't need any fancy 3D software or skills required, just a lot of patience to get this unique design kind of pulled off here. So number one, I will provide you with the bird photo that you're going to work off. This is a day 1 and day 2 tutorial. So on day 2, you can bring in your own image and choose a different animal that you would like to work with. So we're going to go on out to Photoshop. I already have the file kind of open here. Let me fit it on screen and kind of hide the grid here. There we go. So you can see the original image that we're going to be working off from. Okay. All right. So for step 1, we find your photo. You open it up in Photoshop. And then step 2, to really get this to pull off, you're actually going to enable your grids, is what I had up in the first image here. So for this first part, I'm going to go up to the top and I want to click on View. And I'm going to go down to Show right here. And here's where I'm going to look for grid. Now I have my grid set up a little different than what yours is going to look like. So I'm going to take you through those steps on how you can do that. My next step is I want to make sure that snap is on. So it snaps to my grid line. So I'm going to go back up to View. And I'm going to go down to where it says snap to. And I just want to make sure that I have a little check mark next to guides and grids. After those 2 steps are done, then we're actually going to go in and change our preferences to how we see and use the grid and the guidelines. So we're going to go up to the top and we're going to go to edit and we're going to go all the way down. And you'll see that there's a small little arrow that has additional things hidden down at the bottom. And what I'm looking for is preferences. So right here it says preferences. And in here, I'm going to look for guides, grids, and slices. There we go. Guides, grid, and slices. And that's going to open up a secondary pop-up window. Once you're in this window, we're going to ignore the guides up here and we're going to go down to the grid. For the grid that I chose, you can choose different colors if you don't want to see the magenta. Maybe you want to go more with a yellow tone. And it does depend which animal that you're choosing to do this on, because you want to choose a color that you can clearly see. So maybe I'll kind of scroll down here and go into a green. From there, I'm just going to keep the line set as a straight line. And then I want to make my grid line every 10 pixels. So instead of, I think a lot of yours might show up as inches, I'm going to move that aside so you can see it a little bit better. We're going to click on pixels. And for subdivision, I just want to set that to a 2. So that's going to make a really nice tight grid. Now you can play around with this a little bit for the day 2 of this design and switch up subdivision. You could go all the way up to 5 and you should be able to see the preview over here. Again, I'm just going to keep it at 2, but maybe instead of every 10 pixels, I want to switch that up to every 30 pixels. So you can kind of see off to the side here what that looks like. I might even bump that up a little bit higher to like a 50. And then I'm just going to slide this back on over. Once you have that set up, and again, based on the size of the animal and the type of animal that you're doing, you might want to change this up a little bit for the day 2. So then you're going to hit OK. And now you'll see that the grid that I have applied over the top is set to where I can still see the animal underneath and I know kind of where I'm starting from. Now, this next part we're going to be going into is really how to create an action in Photoshop. Okay, for this next section, we're going to create an action so we don't have to keep repeating making small triangles and adding in the color blur to it. So I'm going to take you through the steps on how we're going to do that. So you're going to select a triangle with the polygon lasso tool. So you need to go down to your base image. And without this action, you would then duplicate that onto a new layer, select the layer, average the selection color. And that's okay. It's a lot of extra steps. And when you start doing that 50, 75, 100 different times, it gets pretty old. So I want to show you one of the other good functions in Photoshop. So what you're going to do is we're going to be setting up an action that does this all with one press of a button. And to make an action, you do have to follow through these steps precisely to make it work. So first you're going to go up to the top where it says Windows. Then we are looking for Action right over here. And that's going to pop up a little sub window here. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger for you. Okay. And what we're going to do is we are going to create a new action and label it, create a polygon. So down at the bottom, I'm going to click the little plus sign, and that's going to create a new action that tells the program I want you to do A, B, C, and D every time I press this button. So I'm going to call this create a polygon. And for the key, when I press the button on the keyboard, I'm going to just choose F2. I would suggest using F2 on your keyboard as well. Everything else, I don't want to have it a Shift F2 or Control. Everything else can be set the same here. And then what you're going to do is you're going to click Record. Okay, so you'll see down at the bottom here, I've got create a polygon. I'm making a new action tool. The reason it's making me choose Shift or Control is because I already have the F2 set as an action. So on this one, I would just have to hit Shift F2, not a big deal. So we're going to hit record. However, since each polygon is in a different location on our image, we can't record the selection itself. So the directions say, stop the recording by hitting the small little square right off to the bottom right here. Then what we're going to go in and do is we're going to make a polygon triangle. So I want my lasso tool. I want to make sure anti-alias is off. I think I might zoom in. I might zoom in a little bit more on the eye here. And go back to my polygon lasso tool. And in here, I'm just going to choose a smaller section of a triangle to create. And you'll notice that it's snapping right to the line. And then I'm going to bring it right back up to the pupil. Okay. Now that I have my selection and I have my background layer selected, that means I can start going through the different steps of the action. All right, so if you're following along on the tutorial, I'm kind of in this section here where we're starting to talk about and starting to set the actions. I'm going to pause this video here and we'll pick it up in the second video.